Hello everyone. Let's discuss about finding errors in a given pseudocode. That is one of the very popular topic in Cambridge Computer Science all-over syllabus as well as in some other syllabuses. Let's see the content now. Important points. There are some pseudocode constructs that we do not consider as errors when we trace errors in a given pseudocode. There are some valid errors in pseudocodes when writing algorithms, but when we identify the errors, we do not consider some fewer things, small things as errors in order to simplify the process. Let's see them now. Important points. Following now set of pseudocode valid keywords, expressions, and methods that we use when writing pseudocode, but when tracing for errors in a given pseudocode type question, we do not consider them as errors. Look at the first example given. If number greater than 50, then print good, end if. That's the normal way we write. When writing algorithms, at the end of a if statement, we normally mention end if. But still, in error finding questions, sometimes this end if is not mentioning, and we do not consider it as an error. When using the if condition, at the end of the if condition, we use end if keyword. But remember, sometimes in error tracing questions, end if is not mentioned at the end of the if statement, but we do not consider it as an error. There are a lot of other errors there will be in the error finding questions. Therefore, we do not consider missing NDF as an error. But still, if there are no any other error, you can consider it as an error. Important points continuing. We do not consider following as errors. What are they? Missing NDF, we have talked about it now. Equal symbol used for assignment without using back arrow. Especially Cambridge Computer Science all-over syllabus, we are using back-arrow for assignment purpose. But still, in error finding questions, most of the time for the equality assignment, both equal symbol is being used. Therefore, we do not consider it as an error. Missing do keyword in the in for loop and while loop. Always you can see do keyword, sometimes they are using, sometimes they are not using. We do not consider it as an error. Missing begin and end keywords. Missing begin and end keywords also we can see in most of the cases. Begin and end is not required in some syllabuses. When writing algorithm, it's good if you can write begin and end, but it's not essential. Combine input and output messages. When writing input and output messages, we can write it separately or we can combine. It also we do not consider as an error. We can write like this: input, enter number, comma number. For example, that is a very much accurate, valid statement. Let's continue about our discussion. Valid errors in pseudocodes. The correct way to identify the higher value is as follows. If you go through especially the O-level papers, this finding highest value, lowest value is very popular questions. Other than that, in A-level and some other syllabuses also, we can see this counting, totaling, finding highest value, lowest value in the questions. So there are correct ways to write it and there are incorrect ways also. You should understand the difference, then you can identify the errors accurately. Validators in pseudocodes, the correct way to identify the higher value is as follows. If number greater than higher, then higher equals to number. That is correct. The correct way to identify the lower value is if number less than lower, then lower equals to number. Both are accurate statements. Most of the time, what is that we can see in error finding questions, there are changes these the sides of the variable. If number greater than higher, they are changing the like if higher greater than number like that. They're changing the sides. So most of the time, the greater than less than symbol sides are changing. These symbol sides are changing. The two words are switching. So be attentive when finding errors in algorithms. In a for loop, if we use another counting statement inside it using some counting variable, it will crash the for loop. Most of the time in for loops we are using it like this. Therefore, it is an error. For count equals 1 to 100, count equals count plus 1. Next count. That is totally wrong. In for loops, the counting actually managing the for loop. For count equals 1 to 100. This is the counter as well as the conditional statement used for the for loop. So if you use the same counting variable inside the for loop and if you use it for a counting statement like this, that will definitely crash your for loop. But still, sometimes inside for loops, you have to identify how many positive numbers are there, how many negative numbers are there, like that. Then what you can do is without just using count, the same name for the variable identifier, you can change it. Positive count, negative count, like that. This count equals count plus one statement would crash the for loop, so we need to remove that line from the loop. So if you mistakenly include it, remove it. If you need to identify positive and negative numbers, change the name of the variable. Inside a for loop, sometimes we need to calculate some other counts. Then can use different variable identifying names like positive count, negative count. Then issues will not occur, right? Then you can see for count equals 1 to 100 do positive count equals positive count plus 1. That is totally accurate. This is a correct statement, no problem, we can use it. Correct way to write total in is total equals total plus number. Correct way to write count in is count equals count plus 1. Here total plus number and count plus 1 sections are mentioned in different wrong ways in most error finding questions. Be attentive about that. Average calculation, where we do average calculation in a loop. Most of the time we enter numbers and we calculate the total and we do totaling about some other values also. Then when you need to calculate the average, you should do it at the end of the loop. But in error finding questions, you can see average calculation they mention in different ways, different wrong ways actually. Other than that, they include the average calculation inside the loops also. Inside the loop, you can calculate average, but what will happen? Every round it will calculate average. That's not what we require. When we know the amount of numbers in the data set, how to use that number for average calculation. Average equals total divided by 50. That's not an error, but that's a best practice. When we don't know the amount of numbers in the data set, can use count variable to calculate the average. Average equals total divided by count. Remember, this method is not an error, that actually best practice. In a loop, when you have to calculate average, if you know how many numbers that we consider, you have to use it. If you don't know, then you can use the particular count variable. Always have to perform average calculation after loops. That will considered as a major error. If you include average calculation inside the loop, that will be considered as an error. You have to remove that line and need to include it after the loop. Valid errors and pseudocodes continue. Variable initializations, that's very important. Sometimes some variables are not initialized. If there are enough errors in as answers, no need to consider them. Actually, we have to initialize the variables, but still in error finding questions, most of the time, variable initializations are not mentioned. No need to consider them as errors, but still, if there are no any other error, you can consider it as an error. Highest equals to 0, that is how we initialize the highest variable. Highest should always initialize to 0 as at the end of the loop it will contain a larger value. Lowest most of the time assigned to a larger value. Lowest should always initialize to a larger value, higher value, as at the end of the loop it will contain a lower value. After any loop, what you need to do? If we have average calculations, mention them, then mention final outputs. That is the best way to mention those values. Tips for writing correct answers. In some questions, line numbers are not given, then have to use the line numbers. Okay, in some question, line numbers are given, then have to use the line numbers. In some questions, line numbers are not given. Then what you can do, then you have to mention that entire line to discuss about the error. If line numbers are not given, state in the wrong chord line have to answer, right? I hope you understand that in some questions, line numbers are given, then have to use the line numbers. In some questions, line numbers are not given. If line numbers are not given, then you have to use that chord line and then you have to explain the error. I hope you understand about the best practices and the correct ways to identify errors in a given algorithm. That is one of the very popular topic in computer science in all our syllabuses most of the time. Cambridge, Edexcel, all syllabuses you can see this error finding. In A-level, some syllabuses also error finding is one of the very popular topic. If you understand what are the errors and what are not the errors, and what we consider as errors in most of the time, you can accurately identify the errors and accurately you can do the question. I hope you understand what we have explained. All right, I hope you understand everything about how to find errors in a given algorithm. See you soon with another computer science topic. Have a nice day.